Hello there. Since I posted some of my other videos specifically about the Nova Air C, the Bigme Ink Note Color Plus, and then the Bigme Galley, I've received a few questions about people wanting to know a little bit more, particularly about the color performance of these devices. So in this video, I'm actually going to do two things. We're going to compare the color accuracy using the template that you see in front of you, and also an LCD version of this. And we're going to look at those three devices representing Kaliedo Plus, Kaliedo 3, and Gallery 3. So we can see the difference in how they handle this spectrum of color. And then after that, we'll do a little bit of a review of Gallery 3 in action in terms of a video performance, comparing that to Kaliedo 3. And the results will not shock you if you've been following these technologies at all. The one thing I will want to say before we kind of jump into all this is that these are comparisons that I originally didn't focus on in my previous videos because they're weren't relevant to how I use these devices or the things I'm focused on. And I think in some ways, particularly the color accuracy is a little bit unfair, and I'll show an example of that as we go through, particularly in comparing the images to an LCD screen. When you're using an eInk device, you're using it in isolation, and I find that particularly with color, when you use an eInk device, you appreciate the nuances, the details of that color when there's nothing to compare it to. You put that next to an LCD, which is very vibrant, and the colors on an eInk screen just wash out and they look terrible in comparison. And I think that gives a false, sense of what the color can do. Because when you look at an e-ink screen in isolation, it doesn't look as washed out as it does next to an LCD screen. So in some ways, it's a bit of an unfortunate comparison, but on the other hand, for the purposes of this video, I think it is useful to do that comparison just to test the color accuracy. So just something to keep in mind. And again, I'm putting this together because it was requested. So hopefully I'll answer those questions, and let's get to it. So to test the color accuracy of our devices, we're going to use two control objects. We're going to start off using this, which is a Samsung tablet, which is the most accurate representation of this image, which I pulled off the internet. And then this will be for indoors. And then for outdoors, we're going to use this guy, which is a printout of this image. This image here on the screen is clearly the most vibrant and most accurate. This image on the back is a little darker and not always color accurate. So I just want to highlight those things before we start making the comparisons. And there's just a couple areas I'll ask you to focus on at this moment. So first off, if you look right here, there's two bands in this image, and they just look like variations of green as it transitions into blue. But if you look on the source material, those are actually more aqua colors. So those get washed out and become green up here, where on the original image, they're actually aqua. So that's one thing to note. The other thing to note is you'll notice that in the left side, the magenta really carries on for a while until it finally transitions into orange and then into yellow. And that's less true of the source image, which magenta really is kind of this band right in here. And then there's a sliver of red here, and then it moves into orange. That red, which is represented here, really gets washed out on the printed image here. I mean, you can kind of make it out here. These are the two bands that are supposed to be red, but they still carry on a lot of the pink of the magenta. And orange really doesn't start until right about here, and then it carries on accordingly. So it's not a perfect representation from this screen to this screen, but most of the colors actually have come across fine. And this is the best I can do as it relates to this image, so we'll have to go with it. But I just wanted to be clear about, especially as we use this control on the outside, that there are some limitations in how the color was represented. All right, let's make the comparison and have some fun. Okay, our first comparison is going to be with the Samsung tablet, again with the original image. And then this first device that we're looking at is the Nova Air C. I have no front lighting on, so obviously things are very muted. I was going to try to do a color comparison here, but it's really dark, so I'm going to have to go ahead and turn on that front lighting. What I'm going to do is set both warm and cold at 50%, and we'll refresh the image. Okay, much better. So in terms of color representation, you can certainly see a lot more detail in the LCD image. If you just look at these orange lines right here alone, you can see those details go right to the center of the image, where here they kind of fade out about here and it washes out completely. So you do see some of the colors washing out. You do see this is clearly yellow, and then you've got the green here, and you've got the aqua that we didn't get in the printed version, so the Kaliedo Plus captures that fairly well. It's a much lighter blue here, but you see a nice transition to the dark. The purple is very light, but it's certainly there. Magenta seems to have pretty much washed out. This almost looks orange to me, and this is a big bulk of orange as well. So this area of the spectrum is not represented well here by Kaliedo Plus, and then it returns to yellow. So there's an example of how Kaliedo Plus compares to an LCD screen. Now we're going to compare the color between the LCD screen and Kaliedo 3. And again, it's a darker image without the backlighting, or the front lighting. I always say backlighting by mistake. But I just wanted to give a quick chance to take a look and see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and turn on that front lighting. So, and again, we're going to go about half and half on each. We'll refresh to get rid of any ghosting. Okay, let's take a look. You can clearly see a lot more definition in the color. Remember with the Kaliedo Plus, these orange lines within the yellow went all the way to the origin of the colors, or the center point. And you can see that happening here as well. So already a much better image than what we saw before. The color representation is a little bit better. It looks a little more washed out to me, but the more I look at the Kaliedo 3 screen, the more I can start to make out the nuances in the colors, which I couldn't make out when I was looking at Kaliedo Plus. So I can clearly see the yellows transition to greens, and I see a little bit of the aquas right there, and the blue. The dark blue is a little more washed out. You can make out the purple. Magenta doesn't really come out at all. It almost looks more red to me in this whole region. Certainly you can start to make out a little bit of orange. It's a light orange, but it's there. So yeah, you can definitely see improvements in the color from Kaliedo Plus to Kaliedo 3. And I want to emphasize, as I said in the introduction, it's such an unfair comparison to look at an LCD screen and compare it to Kaliedo, because if I'm looking only at Kaliedo, all the things that upon immediate comparison look flushed out on this screen, that goes away, and you start to focus in on the color that is there, and it becomes more vibrant, I suppose, for lack of a better term, when you're not making this direct comparison. It's the screen just does a lot better on its own. In fact, let me move this so we can see what it looks like between these. Let's get rid of the LCD screen. And just take a look now at the Kaliedo 3 screen. I'm not sure to what degree this is going to be captured by the camera, but for me, you can start to make out a lot more of the color without having that comparison there. Very interesting. Okay, let's go now to the Gallery 3. All right, so now we're looking at the LCD screen versus Gallery 3, and as before, I'm just going to start off without the front lighting on, just so you can get a quick look at what that looks like. Give that a second. Let's go ahead and see if we can quickly turn on the front lighting. As many of you know, I struggle turning on the swipe down bar on the Gallery 3 without grabbing the device. So here I am, I'm going to go to 50% on both front warm and cold light. So perfect. Click on that. There we go. Let me refresh that image. Okay. So very similar to Kaliedo 3, we see that detail that was lacking in Kaliedo Plus. Again, just to refer to these two orange bars that go to the center point, you can certainly make that out in this image. The yellows look pretty good. I would say the greens will certainly wash out right here, but then they come back as a darker green here. So this band of green is not bad, and then the lighter greens are more yellowish. Pretty decent on the aqua. The blues are a little washed out here. The dark blues are fine, the purples are fine. This is probably the best representation of magenta that I've seen on the three devices. And you see more of a transition from the magenta to the orange bands. The reds are a little washed out into orange. These two bars would be the reds, and I think they're more orangish to me. And the oranges look pretty good. So interesting, yeah. So there are some strengths to the Gallery 3 in terms of color accuracy, particularly in this region of the image. But the greens, I think, really stick out, particularly in this band right here, as not being as well represented, but generally not too bad. All right, let's take this outside and see how this looks in the daylight. Okay, we're now outside, and we're looking at our paper control, which is on the left, and on the right we currently have the Nova Air C. We're outside, as I mentioned. It is an overcast day, so we're not getting direct sunlight, and it's just a little bit darker than usual. But still, eInk does really well on outdoors, even on days like this, and we can get a good sense of the colors, which I think are a little more obvious. A lot of the gradients in the colors on the Nova C now that we're outside. For example, over here, we can make out much more of the darker greens here on the edges, transitioning to the lighter green. I don't recall that before. We still don't see that these bars going to the center point. It still tapers off about here. That's to be expected. But a lot of the colors are a little more obvious here. See a little bit more change in the colors, but this is still washed out overall, I'd have to say. I mean, it's a little bit better, slightly better with the magenta here on the left, but it's still kind of one blob of color to my eyes. All right, let's take a look at Kaliedo 3. Okay, now we're looking at the paper control versus Kaliedo 3. Same conditions. I don't believe we have any front lighting. Let's take a look. Nope, we're good there. We'll refresh. Okay. And just like indoors, we can see a lot more detail in the colors. You know what I didn't notice before is it looks like there's actually a lot more definition. Well, of course I wouldn't have noticed this before because we were looking at our LCD screen, but you can see a lot more definition in the lines of the colors than you can see on the paper. It transitions from yellow to green fairly well. A little light in the green here, but not too bad. Nice aqua. The blues are nice, albeit a little darker here. Purple, a little darker, a little washed out, but still you can make it out. The magenta is still a little more reddish to me. And we definitely have a couple of red bars there, and then it transitions to orange. So pretty good representation of color here, and I think that it does a pretty good job overall. Again, I would argue with Kaliedo Plus, we saw kind of a washing of this entire region. I think with Kaliedo 3, we still see a washing out of the colors, but the region is smaller now. Because I would argue that this part here is pretty good. It's the lower quadrant, particularly after you get past the violets, that it starts to wash out. But pretty good overall. That's a nice color representation. All right, let's take a look at Gallery 3. So for our color accuracy test, we're going to finish with the Gallery 3, which we have. There's no front lighting on the Gallery 3, and as we look at it, not as much definition in the lines as we saw with Kaliedo 3. So Kaliedo 3 had much more distinct colors, lines, and those lines were more true to the control image, where you can make out a lot more of the individual bands of color. Just looking at the color accuracy itself, pretty similar to what we saw indoors. So the yellows are pretty good. It washes out a little bit in the lighter greens. Darker greens actually come out a little bit better outside. Aquas are pretty good. The blue washes out. That's interesting. It looks a little bit purplish to me, on the lighter shades anyway. Not bad on the darker shades. The violets are all right. This is probably the most accurate version of magenta that I've seen, although there's kind of an interesting break here that looks orangish in the middle of a couple of the magenta lines. And then it flows right into orange, so I don't see any representation of red in this image. So not too different than what we saw indoors with the front lighting on, where the light greens don't really come out much at all, and then the reds are not present either. Okay, this is just kind of a bonus. We're going to compare the videos of the Kaliedo 3 screen versus the Gallery 3 screen. So Kaliedo on the left, Gallery 3 on the right. We already know that Gallery 3 is not going to look good, and Kaliedo 3 will handle this much better. So, but I'm putting this on because it was requested, and we'll just have some fun with it. So let's go ahead and play both. I believe I do have audio on the one on the right and not on the left, so don't let that distract you. Just focus on the video. So here we go. Both devices are currently set up in extreme mode, which is a combination of the video quality and the refresh rate. Can clearly see that the Gallery 3 is choppier, much smoother on the left, still very grainy on the left image. Let me move my camera around to see if we can get a little less glare. There we go. You know, the gallery almost looks like a series of images set to about 1 second that flip through to give the illusion of a video, where there's a little bit of a stop motion feel to the video on the right, but it's very subtle and it's much more passable as a video. It's really no contest as we thought going in, but since it was requested, I wanted to go ahead and share this comparison. Okay, I think that's about enough of that. So with that, this ends this video. If you have any questions, please put those in the comments below and I'll be sure to reply to them. As always, the main reason why I do these videos is to provide information and details out there that you wouldn't necessarily have access to just because of the pithy nature of the information that's out there, particularly for a device like the Galley. So hopefully that has achieved that result, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them the best I can. I hope you have a great day.